Hello everybody, Rob here from Average Hobby, and today I wanted to talk about this. So this is my 1 year of using an airbrush, I guess, review. So I've had an airbrush now for 1 year, and I thought I'd talk about the things that I've learned and things that I kind of want to share and things that I've done. So firstly, we're going to go through the paints and things like that I've used, things I've noticed that took me a little while to get used to. And then we'll get into things like just the maintenance and cleaning and little idiosyncrasies of airbrushing. So, what paints have I used? Well, I've used, we'll start with the Army Painter stuff as I throw it all on the floor. So I've got some quick shade that I've used, some Fanatics I thinned down and put through the airbrush, some Army Painter Speed Paint I have used and put through the airbrush, and then Army Painter pre-thinned air paint. Overall, it all worked good. I really had no issues. There is a bit of a learning curve because of your environment and other stuff. Thinning paints, like for example the Fanatic here, might take a little while to just try to get your good ratios in. For me, I found it's about 3 drops of thinner. Actually, it's 2 drops of thinner, 1 drop of flow improver. Seems to do well for me. But even then, some days it ends up being a little thicker than I wanted to, or even a little runnier depending on the humidity. So I have a dehumidifier and a humidifier actually in my basement to kind of control things. One thing I have used that I don't suggest doing, and that's putting dirty down rust through your airbrush. Long story short, you don't need to use this in your airbrush. Can I get a better light? Lighting, gotta love it. Putting dirty down rust, verdigris, etc. It's just not needed. To be honest, a wet brush with some water and all that stuff, the way they do kind of show you putting it on with a brush, that works the best. I think I just wasted a lot using it through the airbrush, not so much as it being aerosolized and going up into the ether, but just coating a lot. And yeah, I mean, I will show you. This is what I did it on. It's nothing too crazy. I feel like I just wasted a lot. What I would do is I'd actually pre-wet and then spray on the rust. But yeah, I found it okay. I used contrast paints. This is the Shaiish Purple. Flowed really well through the airbrush. You have to use an eyedropper to drop it into the brush or into the cup area. Perfectly fine. I used shades as well. These worked pretty good on larger models. Smaller models, it kind of overkilled a little too much. And last but not least, with the use of a respirator, I used an enamel, specifically streak and grime. Once again, you don't need to use an airbrush. Using a brush is perfectly fine for this stuff. And going forward, that's actually what I'm going to be using. I actually got a pair of really cheap synthetics to apply this to models and stuff like that. It is not needed whatsoever. Most of my primers are actually all my primers are these two companies. So we got obviously Army Painter. This is the Army Painter Gray that came with the starter set. It works really good. I like it color wise better than this, but this stinks. This has a smell that it goes on nice. It looks nice, but it smells like a barn, like an actual, honest to God, used barn. It smells like the Royal Winter Fair. If anyone from Ontario has gone to the Royal Winter Fair, it smells like barn. I don't know what it is that's in there that makes it smell so bad, but it smells so bad. So bad. But most of my primers I use are the gray, the white, and the black Vallejo. I mean, those are just the go-to. They coat really well. One thing I have learned, actually, and I'll talk about my thinners as well. So I also use Vallejo airbrush thinner. And I also use Vallejo Flow Improver. Now I have a video on the differences between the two and why you'd want to mix and all that stuff. To clean, I use the manufacturer's cleaner. It works like a charm. What I do though is I put them in little containers like this. This is water and this is the cleaner. What I'll do when I'm doing my usual spraying, once I'm done with the airbrush, for whatever I'm doing color-wise, meaning whatever is in here and it drains out, before I put any additional paint of the same color or even move on to the next color, I'll rinse it with water first. And I never really get clogs. The only time I get clogs is when I get lazy and I overfill the cup, and I might get a little bit of needle drying and stuff like that. But yeah, it's usually not a big deal. And then usually in between colors, I'll rinse and spritz with this. Usually when it comes to cleaning, I'll be using these pointed end Q-tips. They are amazing for getting into the bottom of the cup. And they're also, try to get closer to the camera here. They're also really good for cleaning around the nozzle as well, which is really nice. Every now and then, once I'm done my full cleaning and I'm going from color A to color B, I'll usually take a pipe cleaner. I'll cut it maybe a third of the way, bend it into like an L shape, shove it in, give it a couple spins, clean it all out. Usually rinse again with water and cleaner maybe, and then put it over here in my garbage. Every now and then you got to do a little bit more of a deep clean. So what I will use are these brushes here, just your standard, stiff bristled brushes. Every now and then I might get a clog, so I'll use these to kind of help break the clog down a little bit. These are just steel. Now, mind you, I will say this. Actually, I think these are aluminum. You'll notice some of them actually have color on them. I also use these to unclog my dropper bottles as well. They work perfectly fine. I also have this little thing here. This nice sharp little point on the end of it. All it's used to do for me, give me one moment, is if the nozzle is clogged up. Let's see the needle there, super fine. But I'll just use this just to kind of run around the inside a little bit, very lightly, so I don't do any damage. Usually I'll put some sort of thing on this, whether it's cleaner or water, just to kind of help run through things and just get any little large blockages. Honestly, I barely ever use this. I think I've used this more to unclog dropper speed paint bottles than I actually have doing anything else actually. I use these to sometimes soak parts in to just clean them if they need cleaning, or to mix my paints. Brushes is to basically just mix inside here if I want to, or mix inside those plates. I use a ultrasonic to clean all the parts when I take it apart. And speaking of taking it apart, the number one thing you need to remember is lube your airbrush. Big thing I learned right at the beginning was to lube my airbrush, because no one mentions it. Lube your airbrush. Your slide, the part that slides on your airbrush, right here, you'll see it in the really crappy lighting, needs to move. You gotta lube it. Sometimes even if you don't take it apart for a long time, you might still need to take it apart to lube it, just because over time the lube will dry up a little bit, depending on obviously the quality of the lube. I do take it apart, as I said, to basically give it a nice deep thorough cleaning once every, I think it's every 40, I've just come up with a number randomly, I don't know if it's good or not, but roughly every 40 what I call full cycles, meaning every 40 times I have taken this all apart, or sorry, I've actually like done full job. So for example, painting these guys up is going to be one cycle to me, using all the different colors and all that stuff. So basically every 40 kits or so. Or if it needs cleaning early on. I've had a little issue with an O-ring that caused me to take it apart earlier. An O-ring fell apart. Spare parts, always good to have. While picking an airbrush, I have now found that getting spare parts or having access to spare parts is a huge, huge thing. Always make sure you have access to spare parts. Now, the things that I've learned. Number one, you don't need smaller needles depending on what you're doing. So right now I've got a 0.2 and a 0.3. I use the 0.3 to use my zenithals, my blacks, my whites, and my grays. When I'm using the Army Painter air paints, I'll use the 0.2 when I go to do my highlights. So for example, Army Painter has the what is this called again? Triad, the Triad system. So what I'll usually do is I will use a 0.3 nozzle. I have found over the last year, 0.3 nozzle to base with my primer, my three colors, the black, the white, and the gray. Then I'll use a 0.3 nozzle for my mid and my base. Then I'll come in with the 0.2 with the highlight and just use the 0.2 to hit certain spots. Now, I have found issues with Army Painter Air and the 0.2 millimeter nozzle. It's taken me a little while to figure things out. But what I've had to do is add just a little, I've had to add extra thinner because there's something about Army Painter Air. I can use a 0.2 millimeter nozzle on speed paints, no problem. Contrast paints, no problem. And washes, no problem. But it's just the Army Painter Air. For some reason, that 0.2 millimeter, I don't know whether it's, some people have said it's the size of the molecule or the size of the paint itself. Or it's just, some people have also said Army Painter only makes their paints to a 0.3. They don't thin it down any further because 0.3 is what most people use. So there you go. So you don't really need the 0.2 millimeter nozzle. You can stay with a 0.3 and do all that. I've also done that. I have found that getting a spray out pot was a good idea. Initially, I was using a Pepsi bottle or Dr. Pepper bottle, one of these. The only issue was that the basically the chemicals coming back was a bit of a pain. And I noticed it was getting all over my hands and gloves. Getting good gloves for painting and good gloves for cleaning. Try to keep them separate so you don't accidentally get cleaner on your mini, etc., etc. I always keep a set of tweezers because every now and then you're gonna need a set of tweezers. I've noticed every now and then I've got to pick something or move something. If you can, get these to mix your paints. The only issue I have found with these is that the amount of paint you can make in here doesn't quite translate to the airbrush sometimes. So what I've started doing is kind of bypassing these altogether and making my own air paints. Basically getting the paints that I want, pre-thinning them or whatever, putting them in a dropper bottle, and then using them. I don't have the now around me because my dropper bottles are all being washed, but that's what I do with my spare paints. For the cleaner, all you gotta do is put some airbrush cleaner in it, and there's sort of the ultrasonic I found. It's a little bit of hot water and a little bit of cleaner, and you can run it. This one heats, and you can run up to, I believe it's 30 minutes, which is pretty nice. Usually I'll leave it soaking overnight. I'll run it a couple times and then grease things up before things are good to go. Yeah, so that's far what I've learned. If you have any questions or you have any tips, leave them down in the comments. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.